Our first interview is with the legendary Russ Austin. In the late 90s, he worked for a company called NIPP. He was a local promoter. He would help all the local bands out, get them to open for nationals, get them to play theaters. He really was the staple of getting this music scene huge here in Denver, Colorado. Russ is one of the coolest dudes I've ever met. This is a great interview. Check it out. All right, hey Russ, how you doing, buddy?
Good to see you, man.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
So, I've known you for probably, how many years? 13?
Well, let's see.
99. Okay.
Yeah, you figure, okay, I started at NIPP in April 98. Okay, and then when, me and Ron just started booking the peep shows.
What are
At
they?
Bluebird, that was, well, the booking, we started doing that in December 98. The first show, it was towards the end of January, I can't remember, I want to say January 20-something. It was towards the end of January there of 99. And then it wasn't too long, maybe a couple months out of that when I met you guys.
Yeah, I think I met you in the beginning of 99.
Right, because you were always, you know, a big part of the scene at that time, particularly the middle scene. And, you know, so then we met, and I don't know, trying to think when your first peep show was, because I know, I mean, obviously the one that really put us on the map was that one we had on February 2nd, 99. I still have the video tape.
When was it?
Okay, remember February 2nd, 99 is when that show with Rogue, when Rogue was headlining.
Oh, right.
And they had, what, Drudgery and Last Supper, and I think there, if I remember right, there's a band from Michigan called Bull, who was the opening act. And that peep show, like I said, I still have the videotape that Rogue made. I still have a copy of that. And that's the peep show. We had a few before that, but that's the show that really just kind of, bam, made me back. Because it was like on a Tuesday night, and, you know, we had that thing with the tickets. We gave all the bands tickets.
Right.
Remember that? And Rogue, I know they had a lot, I forget the exact numbers, well over 100 they had. But the show, you know, with all four bands together that night, we brought in, I remember 300, I think it was like somewhere around 350 tickets, give or take, total. I mean, that really put it on the map.
Right.
Because it was kind of slow going, and there was a lot of hesitation. Well, I mean, obviously not hesitation on my part, but a lot of, and I guess you could say reluctance on the part of NIPP, or at least a lot of the people at, excuse me, at least a lot of the people at NIPP, like the owners, were really concerned about us doing a lot of middle shows, because they'd done some, but it wasn't like a main thing, it wasn't like a big thing, and it wasn't really anything that any of them were into. None of them really grew up as metalheads. I mean, they all said they listened to some, but they weren't really big into it. But then you kind of throw me in the mix,
Right.
and everything changes.
Oh, it did. Metal scene became huge after that.
Yeah, because I kept pushing for it, and it's like one example that I brought up to, I mentioned Dave, who runs David B Productions, and he's the one who did Black and Blue a few months ago.
Oh, yeah.
And with the guitarist in VD, you know, Violent, can't say the name, Violent Degenerates back in the late 80s there. You know, lost my train.
You just ran into him, you said?
Yeah, well, I actually talked to him. I didn't actually run into him. But, excuse me, but, anyway, let's see, what was I saying? Sorry about that, I lose my train of thought easily.
That's all right.
What was I saying?
So you're talking about the metal scene when you came in.
Yeah, when I came in there, I repeat, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, because I mean, there's so much in the story to tell, but yeah, you know, like I was saying, they didn't really put on local metal shows. They did some, and you throw me in the mix, and not only am I into that, have a background in that, but no one else to cover.
Right.
Whether it's, you know, the other people booking the shows, or the people that own the place, or the people that work the bars at the Ogden Bluebird, etc., etc. None of them are like big into it, but then it's like you throw it in there, and I think what sold them, not that they became fans or anything, but I think at least from a business standpoint, what sold them is that they realized that not only was there a crowd out there and one that would support the bands even on the weeknights, not just the weekends, but they also learned that even on the weeknights, like on Tuesday nights or whatever, that they would actually buy drinks. Because a lot of those nights, like for example, on a weeknight at that time, if you had a show where the average bar sales were around $10 a head, and assuming at least 100 people in the venue on that weeknight, then you were at the very least breaking even. But what we found on one of these shows, at least from the metal shows, is that we could get upwards of not only 150 people in there, but even on a weeknight, the bar sales instead of $10 a head on the average would be closer to $12 a head on the average. So that right there, just looking at the numbers, just playing the numbers game, then you can see it's like, man, there's something there. And it wasn't a surprise to me. I knew that. It's just they didn't know that. Because especially when people reach a certain level, because you know how metal is kind of like considered for people that are like below average, and it's like a scene that really doesn't matter in the overall sense.
Right.
I knew differently. It's like no. Well, it's kind of like what Larry Flint would say about Hustler magazine. It's like, yeah, you get a lot of people that can barely pay their bills. You're what you would consider white trash or whatever by the magazines. But you know what? There's also this other segment of people that are fairly rich, and even like to the point of like doctors and lawyers and professors and all that end up buying the magazine, but you don't hear as much about them.
Right.
But at the same time, when you look at the numbers, whether it be the sales of the magazine and the advertising revenue, et cetera, then you realize there's something more there than what other people than what other people want to make it out to be.
Right, that's true. Well, it's like that on a national level. Metal's the biggest it's ever been, even bigger than the 80s right now, and they still get no respect. The radio has to play it in the middle of the night, metal. It makes no sense to me. But.
Right, well, exactly. It's like, and you probably saw it, but you remember that Halloween episode of the Metal Show, I should say, a couple of years ago, and Blackie Lawless from Wasp was on there. And, Blackie Lawless was saying, and he was talking, especially around the world, not just the U.S., but around the world, like, I think Russia was one of the places where Wasp was about to leave for when he was doing that interview. And he was saying, we're bigger now than we were then, referring to the 80s.
Right.
And,
it's crazy.
Which in a lot of cases is true, because especially with the internet, everything has become so worldwide. It's like if you ever seen that documentary, Global Metal, that Sam Dunn did, the guy that did, Metal, Headbanger's Journey and all that.
And Iron Maiden.
Well, he had Lars Ulrich on there, and of course they were talking about the whole Napster thing, which I think that was in 2000, whatever that was. And, Sam pointed out to him that, when you look at it around the world, especially in poorer countries like in the Middle East and Eastern Europe and whatnot, that the only way people really are able to listen to the music is by illegally downloading it. Lars even admitted that when the last Metallica album came out, that he even illegally downloaded a copy of it. And he basically said that he was at peace with the whole thing, I guess it's one thing, looking at it through the eyes that, where we were with the internet and everything, in 2000 as opposed to where we were in that interview was like in 2009 or something like that.
Right.
So, just that difference.
Oh, yeah.
And when you look at it, it's like, because see, the thing is, even though it sucks on one level that people would be illegally downloading that music, the fact is, now those kids are hearing about it. If you've ever seen the footage of even kids in Iraq or whatever, they may not be out there buying the CDs or whatever, but they're out there buying the T-shirts. Right. And if by chance those bands come to, whatever country, I can't remember the exact countries, but they were talking about how kids from these other countries would go to another country just to see a show. You know?
Right.
So it's like for people, you know, in the States or whatever that, you know, bitch about going to a show on a Tuesday night because they have to get up early for work the next morning. It's like, dude, you don't know how lucky you are. It's like, if that's a show you really want to go to, you can put up with only having 3 or 4 hours of sleep.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, the kids, you see those kids like in the Middle East and whatnot. You know, I mean, they will go out of their way and then some, just to go to a show. That's how much it means to them. And when you see something like that, it reminds you of how you felt as a kid. I mean, it's one thing now. You know, I'm almost 40, and it's, you know, obviously that's a lot of time in the past. But like we were talking about earlier, going back to those days in the late '80s, the music scene. I was a teenager. You know, BD practiced in my basement for a while. You know, so I mean, you know, see, I remember, it's like when I see global metal and I see those kids in there, I can remember what it was like for me back then. Because there was no internet back then, or MySpace, or anything like that. You know, so it was like you had to go out there and you had to find the music.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You had to go to the shows. You couldn't just turn on TV and see a concert, or go to whatever on the computer and see a concert. You actually had to go to.
Had to actually go to the concert to do it. Yeah, that's true.
So,
Well, I kind of like to get back to before the metal scene and all that stuff. When I met you, ever since I've known you, you've been in a wheelchair, unfortunately. But I've never, back then anyways, asked why you were in a wheelchair. I don't know if I was afraid to, thought I was gonna.
Right.
So anyways, so let's go back to your childhood. I mean, tell us the steps of what happened to land you where you're at.
Okay, well, let's see. I guess the best place to start is, you know, I was always one of those kids who, you know, I mean, certainly not mentally, but physically, I was always slower. You know, whether it's my reaction time or just like, you know, how you playing sports like baseball or whatever, you know, and just the way I would run the bases.
So all your life you're a little bit slower?
Yeah, I was always
for me, I was always mentally slower. But
okay, but I think it's around the time, maybe it was the summer of '80, I think, somewhere in there. So I would have been 8 going on 9 at the time. And they used to do those tests where, you know, like, say you had a swim class or something like that, they would, you know, bend you over and look at your spine to see, you know, whether or not your spine was straight. And they noticed, you know, obviously that my spine was curved, which was later, to make a long story short, that was later determined to be scoliosis.
Scoliosis, okay.
But, you know, in my case, they realized that the story didn't end there, that there was something more to it. And so by the following summer of '81, we had went to a doctor who was actually the husband, because we had a pediatrician. You know, she was the one that basically oversaw when I was diagnosed with scoliosis. Her husband was a neurologist.
Okay. So,
you know, we ended up going to see him, my brother and I, because my brother ended up having the same thing I did. And that's what you say, you know, we didn't get an official diagnosis, but the initial diagnosis was was something called Friedreich's Ataxia, which at that time we never heard of. But that's basically, you know, a neuromuscular disorder or disease, depending on which one I call it, that is recessively inherited, which means that you get the gene from both parents.
Oh, really?
And it's not like you see it from day one. It's something that develops over time. Most cases of it, like myself and my brother, are early onset Friedreich's. Whereas, you know, there's a group of people that have, you know, the dominant kind of Friedreich's ataxia, which means that they can inherit the gene from one person, but that's not, with Friedreich's, that's not very common. It's usually recessively inherited. And I know a lot of ataxia people don't like it when I do this, but, you know, it helps, I think, for a layman because they know MS and MD.
Right.
When I say that Friedreich is kind of like MS or MD in the sense that it is a neuromuscular disorder and it is progressive and it is degenerative and there's no treatment, or well, no proven treatment. There's experimental treatments, no proven treatment, but of course no cure. So it's like when you get it, that's pretty much it.
So even when I met you 12, 13 years ago, you have slowly deteriorated since then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, basically that's that's the course, and a lot of when I talk about experimental treatments, it's basically what that is what I would call a way to prolong the inevitable, because excuse me, you can't really stop it altogether, because they don't really know enough about it. I mean, part of it with Friedreich's, it's just like a lot of diseases that are named after the doctor that originally discovered them, and or like in the case of Lou Gehrig's disease, the person that is most famous for having it. Okay, when you're in that situation, that basically means that they don't really know any more about it than when they first, quote unquote, discovered it. Right. So, and that's kind of frustrating too. But I found that the best way to treat it is just basically to watch your diet.
Oh, right.
Because nutrition, I mean, it's not like the be all end all. It's not like it's the ultimate solution. But as far as making things at least tolerable, and certainly when you're in a wheelchair, you want to keep them becoming too fat, especially since I'm diabetic as well.
That's right.
You want to get too fat. I got more weight on me than I should, but
no, you're not fat.
yeah, I mean, you just see just how fat. I can go on forever about some relatives, and most of them can walk and talk just fine,
Yeah, right.
Like my brother, and that's one thing with my brother, but it gets to the point, he's younger, but he's not a lot younger.
Right.
He just turned 38, and, like I said, I'm almost 40, so, it gets to the point, it's like, well, okay, if that's what makes him happy, feed me food like that, because he smokes too. Which, I don't have any problem with smoking, but obviously, someone in the kind of physical condition that him and I have, it's not really a good idea, but it's to the point where it's like, I mean, he's 10 or 15 years younger, that'd be one thing, but at this point, it's like, and see, when we were growing up, doctors told us that usually people with Friedreich's that develop it early, like him and I did, don't live much in their 30s. In other words, the number they were giving us at the time was like 35.
Right.
So, I mean, both of us have already beaten that.
Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah.
So didn't you were telling me that you knew a guy who did die at age 35, right?
Well, yeah, he was 33. He would have been 30. If he'd have lived to January, he would have been 34. But
okay.
yeah, he died back in November. And, like me, he had the early onset Friedreich's, like me and my brother did. And I'm trying to remember if he had a spinal fusion operation, because I had to do that when I was 17.
Okay.
Yeah, because, well, see, my curve at that time, if I remember right, it was like 64 degrees. And usually, when the spinal curvature gets to about 60, that's when they start worrying about it damaging the lungs and even the heart.
Oh, no kidding.
Just minded that curve. Wow. So, and I've learned subsequently that I probably didn't have to have the surgery, and I probably could have treated it, basically, through whatever chiropractic treatments, things of that nature, and possibly if I had done it early enough, I don't really knew anything about it at the time, but I know in retrospect that if we have probably, focused more on our diets as we were growing up, in other words, if I just started out like that when I was 10, and chances are by the time I was 17, not that I would have been cured or anything, but it probably would not have gotten to the point where the orthopedic department at Children's Hospital wouldn't have insisted on me having a spinal fusion operation. So,
Yeah.
but of course, it didn't matter now. Because once you go through something like that, it's irreversible.
Yeah.
They go in there, and and basically it's like because I still have like an 18-inch scar
Oh wow.
after all these years. You can really see it now, but I mean, 18 inches, up and down my back where they basically repealed and to put the rods in. But see, what they have to do is they have to scrape the vertebrae, or some of the vertebrae,
Wow.
to get those in there. So because of that, I mean, once they do it, that's it. I not excuse me. It's not like they have these spare vertebrae laying around
Right.
to put back in there, and it doesn't work that way.